And this was the first really modern, corporate modern style office building built around Pershing Square. And now they could build taller, because it was after 1957. And so this corporate modern style is not the masonry and brick, of that era. This is the more modern, and it's kind of preformed concrete, glass, and steel. But this is like the space age now. So do those windows remind you of anything? Or the windows in an airplane? Or a computer punch card? Any of those modern things. Pacific Mutual Insurance Company. But it was remodeled in the 30s to make it more the Art Deco style, which was more fashionable at the time. It used to look like this. The signs on the roof, there's a giant clock and the big signs, those are gone. But so many buildings had big signs on the roof that faced east. And that was mainly because the original train station was down here, down 6th Street. So when people got off the train and they walked this way, they'd see those signs up on the roof directing them to, businesses and hotels and restaurants and whatever. It's a collection of 44 cities. And so there's downtown LA, but there's also downtown Pasadena, Hollywood, Century City, Beverly Hills. All these are like in other cities that would all be put in the middle. But here it's kind of spread out. Downtown Santa Monica, Culver City, there's various cities around it. But especially Century City and Beverly Hills, downtown Beverly Hills. In other cities that would be all downtown. So we're in this building now. But here's a picture of when it was just built, with the different trees. And here's the original park. You can see, and you can see the streetcar wires a little bit. You see how long ago that was. This beautiful lobby is all original, and it's all restored. This whole building was completely restored by Related Realty. And you'll see all the marble on the first floor, the white marble was from Italy, and all the marble on the mezzanine level was from Alabama. And everything's original. This is like a European shopping arcade, where this would be small shops like a beauty salon, a barber shop, maybe a newsstand. Now they're just private offices. But the only new addition to this whole thing is the light bars around the ceiling, to light up the ceiling. These are all original, all of this, the mail chutes, the directory, all of this is original. Just for sustainability, they could have torn this building down and put a new building here. But it's much more sustainable to restore these old buildings and to keep them rather than tear them down. And also, the subway, there is a subway here, and it's up 7th Street, which is a block over. So conceivably, people that work downtown could take the subway if they worked in this building. So here's a great picture of Pershing Square with the hotel, the Pacific Mutual with the annex behind it. But you can see how much better the square was. And you can see there were streetcars all around the square. But you see here on Pershing Square, there were like wood-framed Victorian houses, before the rest of the square was built. This was the first commercial building on the square. But this is the Pacific Mutual, the annex that was built in 1927. But it is a really beautiful example of the Beaux-Arts style with the archways, the decorative elements, the overhang on top again with the Corinthian columns up there. It's really an exquisite building. One of the best examples of the Beaux-Arts style downtown. And also those stone figures are like 12 feet high, and they're holding in the cartouche, in the shield in the middle, it's like a redwood tree, symbolizing the strength and the endurance of an insurance company. So now the insurance company actually is in Orange County, but the building's still named after them. All of this building, those are stone, those carved figures, and they're by Joseph Mora, who we're going to see at the $1 Million Theater, did the figures all the way around the theater. But this building is terracotta, actually. It's not solid stone. but it's terracotta that's cut to look like it's stone. You know, terracotta is like baked earth. And with the climate here, you can do that. And some other cities have, you know, terracotta buildings also. But the base is solid stone granite. It's also had Laurel and Hardy, the silent movie comedians, they had offices here. Richard Nixon had offices in this building. And the LA Conservancy has a few offices on this side. Little notch up there. Those notches, those held the streetcar wires. The terracotta is softer than this. These decorative fleur-de-lis kind of things, these were made in molds of the terracotta. Actually, in a company, Glading McBean, in the Heron Building, they made these. But so these could be applied to the building rather than carved out of stone, you know, which a lot of buildings do. This is really solid stone. You feel the difference. This is the parking garage for the Pacific Mutual Insurance Company building. But this is how they built parking garages in the 1920s. You know, it's like Paris. This is the side entrance of the Biltmore Hotel. So there's a crack there where this is the new addition in the 30s. Oh, sorry. And the original's back there. But that entrance there, the side entrance, a lot of times movies will shoot that that can be London, Paris, New York, whatever. In fact, in Chinatown, with Faye Dunaway and Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway comes out of there and she walks to Jack Nicholson's car, which is parked right here. But they use that as, it's LA, but it's an interesting use of that. But I was a set decorator for 30 years, and I did the last 5 years of NYPD Blue of our 2000, and we would come downtown all the time. There wasn't that much construction and redevelopment then, but we would shoot downtown LA for New York. And so we just changed some of the street signs, changed a couple signs on buildings, and then they'd bring in maybe 2 New York buses, and maybe 10 New York yellow cabs, and then dress people in heavier clothes sometimes. And it would pass, you know. And the show would go to New York for a week and shoot maybe for a week of big shots with the main cast members on the street in New York in front of famous, you know, New York sites, and cut those in, you know, to certain episodes, so it felt more like New York. And there was also a back lot at 20th Century Fox, so you could shoot small street scenes also. This is the Checkers Hotel, which used to be the Mayflower Hotel. It's been redone as this boutique hotel, but it's a different style than the Beaux-Arts. This is called Churrigueresque, and it's kind of a Spanish Rococo. And it's a little bit more extravagant and a little frothier than the Beaux-Arts style. But it's also a very beautiful style. The main addition with this side of the modernization with the tower was they added this car entrance, you know, the auto entrance to the hotel, which, you know, any modern hotel has to have. So now, you know, it finally has that. California Edison building, was built in 1930, also at the height of the Depression. So this is also Art Deco, you know, but it's smoother, it's more vertical. It has these zigzag motifs. See the zigzags over the door, and also under the spandrels. The spandrels are underneath each window. That's called the spandrels. There's a diamond within a square motif, and they carried that throughout the building. You'll see. But this is also that Egyptian influence. You know, you can see it. You know, and it's modern compared to the other things. But it's also the 150 feet. It's also that, but this was the tallest building around. And you see it in like 1950, like black and white movies from the 50s. Sometimes you notice this building, or I do, but it's some people might, but it says Edison. There's a neon sign and light bulbs that say Edison on the front of it, so it's really recognizable. But you notice it in a lot of buildings. But this also has the unoccupied space on the top in the little tower. This was done by Allison and Allison, who also did the Royce Hall at UCLA. That actual corner used to be the Biltmore Theater, and that was the big downtown theater where the Broadway tour shows that came from New York, they would always play in that theater. But once they built the music center up on Bunker Hill with the Amundsen Theater, then the shows went up there, and then they tore this theater down. This entrance here, you know, this would be Beaux-Arts mixed with Art Deco, which mixed with Byzantine. It's all a mix of all these different styles, especially right here, and the lobby. This piece is by Bill Barrett. It's a sculpture. At a certain point in the 80s, they determined any new project, and this would be the restoration of this building, was the new project. I had to contribute a certain amount towards some kind of art piece, you know, for the percent for art it was called. So this was the percent for art for this building. And it was meant for the corner. It was going to be on a fountain, but they had to cut back the street somewhat and it wouldn't fit anymore. So they just put it up here. And here is like a really great example of Art Deco. This whole doorway. See the zigzag pattern? That's always Art Deco. This sunburst, that's Art Deco all the time. And these bronze doors, this waving pattern with the sun, that's like hydroelectric power. But we'll go inside. So a very beautiful lobby, like there's 23 different kinds of marble in here. You know, there's travertine on the big columns. And all of these, this pattern in the floor with the marbles is the diamond within the square again, which we saw under the spandrels. So we see that throughout. And there's a really beautiful, like, elevator entrance, or the elevator lobby with the coffered ceiling. And once again, this is a mix again of Beaux-Arts, Art Deco, Byzantine, all mixed together, like a lot of these buildings did. Even the grill work, like all this little grill work, that would be Art Nouveau, so they're mixing another style. This mural is by Hugo Ballin. See his name down in the corner. But this is kind of, it's called the Power, the Hand of God. It's kind of a mural about the hydroelectric power and man's strength. Benjamin Franklin is up on the right in the middle, and there's kind of stone cutters here at the bottom. But this was done with Hugo Ballin. His wife was a silent movie actress, Mabel Ballin, and a lot of these craftsmen who did this, they were immigrants, you know, who came mostly from Europe at the time. But these craftsmen could work on Hollywood sets and also on murals in buildings like this, so they could go back and forth because there was work in both fields. So a lot of these murals in these buildings downtown were people that also worked on like Hollywood sets. You see this marble here, it's like a mirror image, and that's called booking, where they take a piece of marble and they'd like cut it down the middle and then they could open it up, and you see the mirror image, you know, all the way around. So here's the library, built 1926 by Bertram Goodhue was the architect, but so this is the addition, and that's the original. But that's what they were going to tear down. But they had some fire damage in the, I think in the 70s, and there were several fires, and so they were going to tear it down. But then the Conservancy came, and by the 90s it was all restored, and that took years. And it was Brenda Levin did the restoration of this, and she's done a lot of notable buildings around the area that have been restored. Architecture is a monument, it's monumental. And it's a mix, again, of Art Deco and kind of Byzantine. We'll see the top. The top was going to be a dome. And then they decided, no, let's go more with this Egyptian feeling and do the pyramid. So they did the pyramid. And once again, you see the sunburst on top, which we saw over here. And on the very top, you see a hand holding a torch, a gold hand holding a torch, and that's the torch of knowledge. And we'll see the original inside. This is a duplicate that they had to put up because of the outdoor, the elements were destroying it. So this is a resin version of the original, which was terracotta. Before 1926, LA was trying to, be recognized as a big city and a first-class city. But before that, it had the libraries, like a lot of other cities. The library would be in a section of a department store, or above a saloon, there'd be a section that would be a library. But then once they got the real library, then, LA could feel at least it was a real city. When they were gonna tear this down, they made a deal that they could sell air rights, where they sold air rights to keep this low, they sold air rights over here so these skyscrapers could be built. And then the plan was, if you had a city block, you could build the entire block, you could only build 10 stories. But if you build half of the block, then you could build 20 stories. And if you build, just a portion of the block, but you had a big open plaza, then you could build these skyscrapers. And the idea was they wanted downtown LA to be kind of more open, not the dark canyons like New York and Chicago, say. The murals, as you see in the corner, were done by Dean Cornwell in 1933. And they were all painted on Belgian linen in London. It took him 3 years to paint these, and then they were glued like on the wall. But these have all been restored. Years ago they were all dirty and smoky, and now they've all been cleaned and kind of like back to their original brightness. But this Dean Cornwell was an illustrator, so his style was everything outlined in blue. And it's kind of a romanticized white man's version of history, with kind of the conquerors above, and then all the indigenous people are kind of in lower positions in the foreground, which is unfortunate, but that's the way they did it then. But it's all the era of discovery, the mission building, the Americanization of LA, and the founding of LA. The carvings up there are the wisdom of the East and the wisdom of the West. And also in the center is a bas-relief of the riders, the kind of Roman soldiers on horses passing the torch of knowledge. This over here, this brick building, that's the California Club. And that was a private men's club. It was like no women, no Jews, only white people, but now it's all changed. And but this with the cypress trees, that's almost Romanesque. It could be a building in Rome. But that's a very beautiful building. Underneath here, there's a regional connector where the light rail lines meet to transfer. It's easier to transfer. There's the light rail from here. The light rail goes all over the LA area. It's the second biggest mass transit system in the country. But the light rail goes all over LA, and then the subway is now downtown. It goes to Hollywood, it goes to the Valley, to North Hollywood, and now it's working its way down Wilshire, and it stopped at Wilshire and Western. But in the next few years, the subway's going to open. You'll be able to go from Hollywood or downtown out to LACMA, to the LA County Museum, and the new Academy Oscar Museum, because there'll be a stop on Fairfax, and also La Brea, and then it'll go further into Beverly Hills, which is amazing, because there'll be a subway stop like right off Rodeo Drive. And they fought that, Beverly Hills fought that for 10 years to stop that subway. They did not want the subway stopping in Beverly Hills, but it's going. And then it goes on to Century City, and then it'll go into West LA. And then the blue line of it's called something else now, but the blue line of the light rail also goes from downtown to Santa Monica. So there'll be two ways to get to the west side on mass transit. Here, this is the Bonaventure Hotel, built in the 70s. this is a really iconic hotel. This style would be called brutalist, mainly because of the base here that is, very brutal, and then the towers. But when this was built in the 70s, they wanted LA almost to be walled off like a fortress from the rest of downtown because it was considered so sketchy. So people could go on these walkways across the street to other areas without coming down on the street. But now any developments, they wanted to engage with the street more. And this whole area, this is the old downtown. The street level activity has really, gotten a lot better. So here's Bunker Hill. This was all a residential area that, from the turn of the century up till around 1959, it looked like this. And this was the residential area downtown. And at first it was nice hotels and beautiful mansions like this. Some of them were up here, look like this. But by 1959 or the late 50s, it had been run down. And a lot of the hotels, there were nicer hotels, were now divided up into rooming houses. The apartments were divided up into rooming houses, and it was getting crummy. So they could go to restore these things. They could have left it crummy, and by the 80s and the 90s, maybe those things would have started to have been restored, but they just tore it down. So it's pretty much leveled, just with urban renewal, which most American cities had at that time. And then by 1959, 1960, had urban renewal projects because the downtowns in America were dying, because all the department stores, there were 10 department stores down here. It was like New York. This was like the biggest thing outside of New York in this country. But the department stores started to open in the suburbs. So then that happened everywhere. So then, it lost all the business downtown, and then all those stores closed. Same thing with the theaters. The movie theaters by the 60s had opened, the Cineplexes all over the place. LA always had more theaters out there anyway, but the downtown theaters started to die and lose business. And then by the 90s, most of them were closed, but luckily they didn't tear them down. But this area was leveled by 35 feet. They leveled it to be flat. And it was divided up into 22 super blocks for development. And that's the result of what we see today. This is all California Plaza, if you're going to go around and see. But these two towers were built in the 90s. And they're both distinctive because they both have one curved side and the rest of it's square. But we'll see this from the other side. Then over here, the silver building is the Walt Disney Concert Hall, which you must have all seen, I assume. But that's there. Beyond the concert hall is the music center, which is like the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion for opera and ballet, the Marte Perform, which has a resident theater, and then beyond that is the Amundsen Theater, which gets the Broadway shows that come. And then the white building there, the cheese grade thing, is the Broad Museum. It's free. You just have the same thing. You have to make an appointment online, and it's not that big, so you can go through it in 45 minutes if you had to, or even half an hour. But it's a really good collection of American modern art. So this is the Plaza of California Plaza. And a couple of years ago, they just changed this. A couple of years ago, that was all a big reflecting pool of water, but it was leaking into the garage below. So they changed it into more of a park space. And in the summer, on Fridays, there's a stage here. So they have like free concerts in the summer at night. In the movie 500 Days of Summer with Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Zooey Deschanel, he sits on a bench over there and he looks at that building where Zooey Deschanel lives. And this building here, this is the subway building. And used to be all the, there were trolleys and, streetcars all through LA. And they tore them down in the 50s, like most cities. All American cities had those trolleys. And they basically tore them out to build freeways. But the trolleys all met downtown in this building underground, and the tunnels are still there. But those are converted into lofts and apartments now. But the windows on top, those are all painted on. And that's part of the percent for art for that building. That condo there, that's the Perlock. Those are condos. They're micro units, like 350, 450 square feet for $350,000, $450,000. For this Angel's flight that we're going to ride, this was built in 1901. And there actually were two of these. They're funiculars that go up the side of the hills. There were two of them. This one, there's only one left, but they moved it about half a block over here in the 50s. And it's 60% of the original. You know, this is the original station that was built. It used to be white, but at one point they painted it orange. There's two cars, Olivet and Sinai, and it's 330 feet with a 35% incline. And it was used partly because when all the people lived up here, you know, if they had servants and, you know, domestics to get groceries and food and shopping, they would take the funicular up and down the hill. And this is before automobiles. This is when there were horse and carriages up here. So this was really useful, so you didn't have to climb the hill if you lived up here. And a lot of people lived up here then. This is the Bradbury Building behind me. And this is one of the most famous buildings downtown. It was built in 1893, again by John Parkinson. But this is one of the oldest buildings left in this downtown area that's still in use. This is Beaux-Arts also. You know, it has the archways, it has the columns, it has the overhang, but it's almost transitional between Victorian and Beaux-Arts. You know, one of the earliest ones. But this was built, there's a railroad millionaire who lived up on Bunker Hill in one of the mansions. This was his office. He wanted to build the most beautiful office building downtown. And you'll see inside it really is beautiful. And this is the $1 Million Theater, which we'll talk about from across the street. But you see the carved figures across the top. Those are also done by Joseph Mora, who did the figures at the Pacific Mutual building. And this was the first theater built, the first movie palace built downtown. There were over 100 theaters in downtown during the 20s and 30s, and now there's 10 or 12 left. But this was the first big movie palace. See, the top is really highly decorated for, you know, this is the Chirigaresque style again. It's beyond Beaux-Arts. It's kind of a little more exuberant, a little more extravagant. But it wraps around the side. But Nicolas Cage used to have a apartment in here, or a condo, or a loft, whatever. But I don't think he does anymore. But on this stage, and the vaudeville stage, like Judy Garland when she was a child with the Gum Sisters, she had appeared here. Gloria Swanson, Rudolph Valentino, and Anthony Quinn, as a child, had appeared on this stage because Anthony Quinn was born in East LA. And Quinn is not his real name. Mexican tiles on the floor, and then the marble on the stairs is from Italy, and all this black wrought iron work was all done in Paris. And then you'll see the ceiling inside. The glass ceiling used to open up, but it doesn't anymore, so it's kind of natural air conditioning. And this was sweatshops. It was, it was police internal affairs, and it's used in hundreds of movies, including Blade Runner, which there's a plaque over here. This mural of Anthony Quinn. You guys all know him? He's dead. He's in Lawrence of Arabia. He played an Arab. They put a putty nose. And he was Zorbid the Greek. But he was born in East LA. Anyway, this mural, he was called the Pope of Broadway since he grew up here. But the floor carries out the floor of the Bradbury Building, carries up the floor to the mural. So when you come out this door, you notice that. They walked from Mississippi to California behind the wagon. And once they got here, through a ratification of the California Constitution, they sued for their freedom, and they won their freedom. And she became like a nurse and a midwife to help birthing children. And she saved $250, which apparently was a lot of money then. And she managed to build a house on First and Spring, which is like right near here. So the park therefore commemorates this was close to where she had her house. But she lived here the rest of her life.